Well, hello there. You're watching All 24 News, World News program broadcasting live from Algiers. I'm Karim Zachary. Let's explore tonight's substance. Tonight, brutal Zionist raids in central and northern Gaza leave dozens dead. Hospitals under fire as Europe moves to sanction the occupation. Details just ahead. Next up, Algeria pushes for bold economic solutions at the Islamic Development Bank meetings, and a $1.3 billion plan is approved with support growing for the Trans-Sahara pipeline. We'll have full details on these developments shortly. Coming up as well, a UN rapporteur slams Morocco's Mahzen for aiding genocide in Gaza, and protesters called to end normalization as crackdowns spark outrage. Also in tonight's headlines, Sudan's army says it now controls Greater Khartoum and parts of Kordofan, and the AU welcomes a new prime minister as hopes for stability grow. Stay tuned, full details coming right up. Welcome back to the program. First off in our news, Zionist airstrikes have intensified across the Gaza Strip, with dozens of Palestinians, mostly women and children, killed in the latest wave of attacks. The Gaza Health Ministry, meanwhile, says at least 75 people were martyred since dawn on Tuesday, as schools, shelters, and tents housing displaced families came under fire in Gaza City and the Central Strip. In the north, occupation warplanes struck a school in the Daraj neighborhood and bombed homes in Jabalia and Beit Lahia, leaving many dead and dozens wounded. In central Gaza as well, 15 were killed when a patrol station was hit near Nusayrat, and 12 bodies were pulled from the rubble in Deir el-Bala. More deaths were reported in Khan Yunis, where children and women were among the victims of drone strikes. For its part, Gaza's government media office described the attacks as systematic massacres, accusing the occupation of waging a campaign of organized terror against defenseless population.
We were in the western area of the camp where there is a soup kitchen. The children, the entire family from the father to the children, staying inside their displaced tent. Suddenly, a reconnaissance missile came after the child went. He was hungry. He asked his mother. He was hungry, so he went to get food from the soup kitchen and came back home. Suddenly, without a prior warning, a reconnaissance missile hit the family, completely exterminating it. The father, the mother, the boy, the girl and the girls. 6 people entirely exterminated.
In the same context, a fire broke out at Nasser Hospital in eastern Khan Yunis after a Zionist airstrike hit its main medicine warehouse, Palestinian media reported. The blaze destroyed vital medical supplies and damaged the hospital's electricity generators. Meanwhile, occupation forces blocked civil defense teams from reaching the Indonesian hospital, where fires raged for hours after another strike on its power units. On a similar note, malnutrition is taking a devastating toll on Palestinians in Gaza, with the ongoing blockade and war crippling the already fragile healthcare system. Hospitals across the Strip are collapsing under pressure, with many, like Shifa, Gaza's largest medical facility, completely out of service. Here's Selma Nasib now with the report.
This gutted, scared building is none other than a Shifa hospital, once the largest medical complex in the Gaza Strip. But that was before the relentless bombardment turned it into a vast field of ruins. Despite the devastation, Shifa continues to operate, though now at severely limited capacity. A single wing has partially been rehabilitated, allowing medical teams to treat the unending stream of wounded. Yet in a hospital, more than 90% destroyed, starved of essential medical supplies, doctors too often find themselves helpless.
بدأت أعداد الجرحى تتزايد.
The number of wounded has increased considerably. We receive between 500 and 600 patients daily in the emergency room, an overwhelming figure given our scarce resources. Treating these critical cases is extremely difficult. We have only 2 operating rooms, far too few for the volume and severity of injuries.
وهذا العدد قليل جدا بالنسبة للإصابات.
As Zionist strikes intensify, the inflow of severe cases grows daily, demanding urgent intervention. But with these limited facilities and supplies, doctors must make painful decisions, prioritizing who to treat and arranging transfers to other hospitals when possible.
حالتنا خطيرة جدا.
My son's condition is very critical. He was hit by a shell fragment near his kidney. The doctors themselves are exhausted, barely able to stand after endless hours.
I have broken pelvis. I've been in this state for over 2 months. My health is worsening because of malnutrition and lack of medication. The doctors are doing their best, but the shortage of supplies takes a heavy toll on us all.
Since the start of this brutal genocide, hospitals across Gaza have been prime targets of Netanyahu's forces. The repeated sieges and bombings have brought the territory's healthcare system to the brink of collapse, while some facilities like Al-Shifa and Nasser hospitals have managed to reopen. Many others, including Kamal Adwan, the Indonesian hospital, and Al-Auda, remain out of service, unable to provide the care that Gaza's people desperately need.
Still with Gaza-related news, the United Nations says it has finally secured permission to bring around 100 aid trucks into Gaza amid a crippling blockade. Jens Lerke, spokesperson for OCHA, confirmed that just 5 trucks managed to enter on Tuesday, marking the first humanitarian entry in weeks now.
On your first one, around 100. Past experience has very clearly showed that the less aid you get in and the less there is properly distributed in Gaza, the more desperation rises. And that has several effects, predictable effects. One is that the insufficient supplies are at greater risk of being looted.
And in another important development, the European Union is set to review its association agreement with the Zionist entity, citing recent developments in Gaza. After a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said a strong majority backed the move, particularly a review of Article 2, which concerns human rights. The EU will now begin formal procedures to reassess its ties with occupying Israel. Similarly, the UK has imposed new sanctions on the Zionist entity over its war in Gaza and continued rights violations in the West Bank. Speaking before the House of Commons, Foreign Secretary David Lammy announced the suspension of free trade talks with occupying Israel and sanctions on extremist settlers. Lammy warned that more measures could follow if the war of genocide against Palestinians continues.
I'm announcing that we have suspended negotiations with this Israeli government on a new free trade agreement. We will be reviewing cooperation with them under the 2030 bilateral roadmap. The Netanyahu's government's actions have made this necessary. Madam Deputy Speaker, today, my honourable friend, the Minister for the Middle East, is summoning the Israeli ambassador to the Foreign Office to convey this message.
On its turn, Sweden has announced its intention to push for sanctions against ministers in the Zionist entity. Swedish Foreign Minister Maria Malmer Stenergard said on Tuesday that Stockholm will work within the European Union to apply pressure. She added that the proposed sanctions will be up for discussions in the coming days among EU member states.
As long as we do not see a clear improvement in the situation of civilians in Gaza, we need to sharpen our tone. Therefore, We will now also push for the European Union to impose sanctions on specific Israeli ministers. The targeted officials will be a subject of discussion within the EU.
Moving on to some economy-related news now. Algeria is urging member states of the Islamic Development Bank to develop innovative solutions for sustainable economic growth amid global economic challenges. Speaking at the Private Sector Forum in Algiers, Finance Minister Abdelkrim Bouzard called for stimulating productive sectors and improving the business climate to boost inner investment. The bank's 2025 annual meetings continued with sessions on partnerships, refugee support, and South-South cooperation.
مرور سياق اقتصادي عالمي مليء بالتحديات مما يدفع بالدول.
The emergence of global economic context full of challenges requires countries to invigorate their productive sectors and promote favorable business climate to attract investments. The organization of this forum, held within the framework of the annual meetings under the theme of Diversify the Economy, Enrich Lives, reflects the conviction of the bank and its members regarding the need for countries to move toward opening up to new means of investment and business opportunities in order to achieve this diversification and sustain their economic growth.
Meanwhile, the Islamic Development Bank has approved a $1.32 billion financing plan to support sustainable growth and tackle climate challenges across its member countries. The plan, green-lit by the bank's board of executive directors during its annual meetings in Algeria, targets key sectors including health, infrastructure, food security, vocational training, and water supply, aiming to create lasting economic opportunities. For his part, the president of the African Development Bank Group, Pakin Wumi Adesina, has praised Algeria's development vision under President Abdelmajid Tebboune, highlighting the country's progress in economic and social sectors. Adesina emphasized Algeria's leading role in regional integration across Africa. The bank expressed full readiness to support Algeria's key projects, including the strategic Trans-Sahara gas pipeline and phosphate sector development, crucial for agriculture and food security in Africa. In other Algeria-related news, on Tuesday, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune received Qatar's ambassador to Algeria, Abdulaziz bin Ali Ahmed Nema. The ambassador extended an invitation from Qatar's Emir, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, inviting President Tebboune to attend the upcoming World Summit for Social Development in Qatar. Moving on to other developments now, Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs Ahmed Attaf arrived in Brussels Tuesday to join the third meeting of African Union and European Union foreign ministers. The gathering aims to assess progress on commitments from the 2022 AU-EU summit, focusing on peace, security, and sustainable development. Ahead of the meeting, Ahmed Attaf took part in a coordination session with African counterparts to unify positions and present clear proposals that reflect Africa's development goals and aspirations. On the same occasion, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf met with his Ukrainian counterpart Andrei Sepia. On Tuesday in Brussels, the two discussed strengthening the friendly ties between Algeria and Ukraine, exploring ways to deepen cooperation. The talks also reviewed recent peace efforts, including negotiations held in Istanbul, aiming to find a just and lasting resolution to the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. In other regional news, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Palestine, Francesca Albanese, has condemned the Moroccan regime for hosting members of the Zionist Golani Brigade, accusing it of direct complicity in the Palestinian genocide. Albanese described this move as a blatant violation of international law and a troubling new level of corruption.
If Morocco's reception of units from the Golani Brigade is confirmed, it would mark a new threshold of corruption and a clear violation of the international obligation to investigate and prosecute individuals involved in heinous crimes. I urge the Moroccan authorities to uphold the sovereignty of international law.
In the same context, the Palestinian resistance strongly condemned Morocco's hosting of members of the Zionist Golani Brigade. The Palestinian Mujahideen movement called it an extension of normalization and a sign of Morocco's morale and humanitarian decline. They urged the Moroccan people to intensify their opposition to normalization and support the Palestinian cause amid ongoing genocide in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Moroccan Front for Supporting Palestine and Against Normalization condemned the harsh repression of peaceful protests against the Mahsen regime's ties with the Zionist entity. The front warned of alarming Zionist security breaches in Morocco and denounced those who violently confront solidarity activists, calling it shameful complicity. And in other African news, the Sudanese army announced Tuesday that it has regained control of all villages in El Jamia west of Jabal al-Awliya near Omdurman, pushing out the rapid support forces. AFP cited military sources confirmed the rapid support forces' last stronghold west of Omdurman was cleared, marking a full military reclaim of the capital's surroundings. Reuters sources also confirmed the army's takeover of Labana in West Kordofan, with joint armed movements seen fighting alongside Sudanese troops. Additionally, the army secured another village in White Nile State. On a related note, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, welcomed the appointment of Camille Tayyib Idris Abdel Hafiz as Sudan's new prime minister on Tuesday. He praised the move as a positive step toward inclusive governance and expressed hope that Abdel Hafiz will help advance efforts to restore constitutional order and democracy in Sudan. To other topical news, European Union countries have agreed to lift all economic sanctions imposed on Syria, according to diplomats cited by Agence France-Presse. The preliminary agreement by ambassadors from the 27 EU member states will end the isolation of Syrian banks from the global financial system and unfreeze the assets of Syria's central bank.
On Syria, ministers agreed to lift all economic sanctions while maintaining those related to Assad regime and human rights violations. This decision is reversible and conditional also on progress.
In the same context, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned on Tuesday that Syria could be just weeks away from civil war. Speaking before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Rubio defended President Trump's decision to lift sanctions and engage with the Damascus government, but cautioned that the Syrian Transitional Authority risks collapse and full-scale conflict very soon.
The bad news is that the Transitional Authority figures, they didn't pass their background check with the FBI, okay? They've got a tough history and one that we understand. But on the flip side of it is, if we engage them, it may work out, it may not work out. If we did not engage them, it was guaranteed to not work out. In fact, it is our assessment that, frankly, the Transitional Authority, given the challenges they're facing, are maybe weeks, not many months, away from potential collapse and a full-scale civil war of epic proportions, basically the country splitting up.
In the Middle East still, Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei expressed skepticism Tuesday about the success of ongoing nuclear talks with the United States. Speaking on the anniversary of former President Ibrahim Raisi's death, Khamenei voiced doubts over the feasibility of the negotiations as Tehran considers a new proposal for fifth round of indirect talks.
Indirect negotiations existed back then, but there were no results, and I don't think it will bring results now. Who knows? The American side that is participating in these indirect negotiations should try not to talk nonsense. We will not allow Iran to enrich is a major overstep. No one is waiting for their permission.
And in another story making headlines, Ukraine scored a major air defense victory overnight, shooting down 93 Russian drones, while tensions between NATO and Russia escalated in the Baltic Sea. At the same time, global powers clash over sanctions and stalled peace talks. Let's get the details with Yasin Rikti now.
Ukrainian forces intercepted 93 of 180 Russian drones, with another 58 electronically jammed, a critical blow to Moscow's strike capabilities. But this one's ripple effects are spreading far beyond the front lines. Russia accused NATO of aggressive acts after Estonia tried seizing a Russian-linked oil tanker. Nevertheless, Moscow says dialogue is possible only if root causes of this conflict are addressed.
The Russian side has once again demonstrated its willingness to reach a final and fair resolution of the crisis. To this end, Moscow will propose to Kiev to work on a memorandum related to a future peace agreement, while making progress toward resolving the conflict. It must be understood that this objective cannot be achieved without addressing its root causes.
Meanwhile, the European Union moved to tighten the economic nose on Russia, sanctioning some 200 vessels in what it calls the shadow fleet, transporting Russian oil and gas, aiming to cut Moscow's vital energy revenues.
We will agree on the 17th package of sanctions today, but we continue on working on the next strong package of sanctions to put more pressure on Russia so that they would also want peace.
In contrast, the US struck a different tone after talks with Putin. President Trump ruled out new sanctions, calling for patience.
It's a real mess. It's a death trap. So I think that, I would say I do have a certain line, but I don't want to say what that line is because I think it makes the negotiation even more difficult than it is. Yes, please.
Thank you.
China also weighed in, urging direct talks between Russia and Ukraine, echoing calls for dialogue and diplomacy amid rising international pressure.
We have taken note of this information. China supports all efforts aimed at peace, direct dialogue and negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, as well as a political resolution to the crisis. We hope that all parties will reach a just, lasting and binding peace agreements, acceptable to all through dialogue and negotiation.
As Ukraine celebrates rare wins in its skies, its future remains precarious on the fractured global stage. According to critics, Russia's proposed peace plan demands Ukraine's surrender rather than a fair settlement. Will diplomacy find a way to ease this war, or will deepening divisions fuel further conflict?
All right, it's time to catch up on other news stories making headlines in the News in Brief, this time with Sofian Kenturi.
As a means of pressure on the Zionist entity, Yemen's Houthis have announced the imposition of a maritime blockade on the port of Haifa in the occupied territories. This measure targets all companies with ships currently at or heading toward that port. Brahim Ghali, president of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, warned of growing regional threats from Morocco's ambitions and its alliance with colonial and Zionist powers. On the 52nd anniversary of the armed struggle, he called for unity with allies and friends to confront these dangers. The UN support mission in Libya released a report proposing 4 options to resolve political deadlock: simultaneous presidential and parliamentary elections followed by a constitution, adopting a constitution before elections, or forming a dialogue committee to finalize election laws, and a permanent constitution. The U.S. Embassy in Algeria stated that the arrival of USS Forest Chairman in Algiers marks a new step in strengthening maritime military cooperation. In a statement Tuesday, the embassy said the visit reflects the depth of U.S.-Algerian security ties and supports ongoing diplomatic efforts to promote regional peace and security.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we reach the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, you can always visit our social media platforms as well as our website. I'm Karim Zachary on behalf of all 24 News team. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, take care.